Welcome to our first in a series of podcasts on leadership. My name is John Brody, and I am a senior executive at Mac Consulting. Today I'm going to be talking to Dave van der Merwe, who leads our executive and exponential leadership solutions. Dave, I think you've done an incredible amount of work in supporting leaders as they make key shifts in their careers. Maybe you can tell us about some of those shifts and when it's kind of important for leaders to take time to prepare and plan and think about that shift. What are some of those shifts that you've seen leaders making and that are really challenging?
Sure, John, a couple of those could well include someone's moving into a new role, they've been promoted in the organization. From time to time, a leader has to take on a large scale project or an initiative within a particular client organization. It could well be a large scale business transformation, sometimes acquisitions, sometimes looking at growth strategies. So there are a variety of times in a leader's career when they do actually see quite a significant shift in their role. And I think that's an opportune time for them to stop, pause, and just reflect on where they're going in their career and what they will do differently as they shift into whatever that new role is required by the organization.
Because I think for me, it resonates with me. I mean, I've often seen that leaders get into those shifts, but they don't take the time to kind of reset or reposition the way they think about their role. They think about what's expected of them, maybe realigning with different stakeholders. So that for me makes a lot of sense. Maybe just in thinking about that, what are some of the kind of challenges leaders face when they make those shifts?
Yes, so John, those vary, but I mean, each individual has their own context within which they operate. But typically, maybe a couple of key things that come out there is work-life balance. I mean, that's always a massive thing, and I always challenge them to think about life balance. One of the other things is working on the business versus working in the business. Many leaders are caught up in the day-to-day, the nuts and bolts, instead of really elevating themselves into their new role to think about where it is they need to take the business, both thinking strategically and the change that they need to lead in an organization. Some of the other ones are just their particular leadership style, potentially some of the blind spots that they've got. And whilst we do not dwell on the negatives or the blind spots, but really the strengths, but sometimes you need to actually deal with that particular blind spot. And other times it's also just focusing on what really matters. Where do they spend their time? Thinking about the narrative that they've got to shape and create in the context of the organization. Thinking about unlocking the potential of their team and getting the discretionary energy from the team. Other examples are just being an enabler for the whole ecosystem to flourish. And sometimes pausing to have a look and say, well, what are the obstacles I need to remove as a leader? The other one is just asking powerful questions. But I think those are just some of the examples where it's the ability for the leader to stop, pause, and reflect and take time out to go and address some of those which you don't often get the opportunity to do.
Yeah, because it sounds to me, and I think that's very real, is that as a leader, you don't often get the time to kind of think and reset, right? And I think for me, that's what I'm hearing for you, is that it's so critical because of the shift in expectation, because of the shift in role, that making that time to actually reset and rethink and reposition yourself is so critical. The other thing that kind of comes out for me in that is that almost leadership happens a lot through doing and through the experience. But having an opportunity to almost reflect and think and adapt as you run is important. I liked what you referenced there, right? Almost sometimes that step away from the business and working on it versus in it. As much as we would like to all have the capacity as leaders to think ahead, think about the future, think about how we're adapting, that doesn't often come up for us, right? So deliberately making that time. Thanks, Dave. I think that's thinking about the challenges that leaders face when they make those shifts really kind of makes me think that there are probably some critical things that leaders could or should consider as they make the shift. Just your thoughts and your experience around the framework that I know you've developed and evolved over the last sort of 8 or 9 years. What are your thoughts around what are most critical factors for leaders to consider as they make the shift?
Thanks, John. I think the most important thing is just actually taking the time out to think about transitioning. So we run a one-day leadership intervention, and really that is important so that you can just take stock of where you are in your career and how you're then going to plan moving forward to be effective. But in our one-day intervention, there are 4 critical elements. We call it our BEST model. So B for behaviors, which is your leadership behaviors, your leadership style. How you pitch up as a leader is really fundamental. And in our view, the X factor, that exponential that we talk about in leadership. The second part is energy. We've all got a finite amount of energy. And so working on the business versus working in the business and knowing when to be where is really fundamental. So use your energy wisely. The next is stakeholders, and obviously really critical to manage your expectations of your stakeholders, understand who those stakeholders are that you need to influence, and then also how you meet the needs of those particular stakeholders. And then, of course, the critical ingredient is your team. Have you got the right team in place? What does that look like relative to the priorities that you've got? And are they aligned to kind of the future capabilities that you need from that team to deliver what you need to deliver as a leader or an executive?
Dave, I think that BEST framework kind of resonates with me, and I think makes a lot of sense. It's quite simple and clear. Just your thoughts, so you're a leader and you're going into a major shift in your career. What do you see as being absolutely critical to pay attention to, or most predictive of a positive result in a shift?
So, John, my sense is that the absolute essence is the leadership behaviors. How do you pitch up as a leader? How are you experienced by your team members? Do you espouse those leadership behaviors and pitch up consistently as a leader? Getting that right is the exponential factor. I think all the other things are there, they're important, but your ability to really understand what you need to do as a leader moving into whatever role that might be, that's the X factor. So for me, that's the critical component.
Dave, thanks very much. I think great insights. It was great to spend some time with you and hear you unpack your approach to helping leaders make these critical shifts. So thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thanks for joining our Mac Consulting podcast on leadership shifts. I hope you enjoyed it. Please look out for further podcasts on leadership effectiveness, which we'll be sharing soon.